Thank you to Sergey and Ruud. That was a good session. And here we are.
Absolutely.
We have the panel together. So we have Sean and Richard from Squared Up. Ruud's coming over from that other talk from Microsoft. Gerald, Sergey, Christian. Great to have you guys with us. So this, we'll see where the panel discussion takes us, but how this was billed is Scom is great the way it comes, but we all know it can be so much more by extending it. That's been certainly a theme from throughout the day, extending to all kinds of tools and platforms and cloud. So you guys maybe hear from each of you what that means, from additional monitoring platforms to all kinds of integrations. What do you guys have to say about that? So I'll hand it over.
Cool. I have some, so we have some questions lined up. I can lead the panel if you guys are okay with it. Cool. What we'll do is I'll throw out the first question. We'll see where it goes. As Jason mentioned, we're going to be doing something about extending Scom, so we can take a look at like management packs or things that are not related to management packs. And since we've discussed management packs a lot today, let's start off with just something out of the box and just say, what types of extensions do you think you could come up with Scom that would extend beyond just writing a custom monitor or a custom management pack? Something different.
Maybe I quickly start because I just quite fresh from a customer. So I visited and it's about reporting, right? And most of you like, oh, what's about reporting? And I keep asking, what's about reporting? Nobody really found a good answer and everybody kind of built workarounds. So they're actually using Power BI, I think, as others do. So I also consider this an extension, which is not related to monitoring. So they basically have a good set of SQL scripts they're basically run on their SQL server and pull out the data and bring it into Power BI. So I found that's a quite good add-on, which actually also others do. So maybe somebody else heard. I see Bruce nodding. So I think because like they don't use the Scom reporting console at all, they just like pull everything out and build it and present it in Power BI.
Yeah, I've heard lots of the Scom reporting console is difficult to use and such. But yeah, I mean, and as you say, it's a less sort of conventional add-on than we added monitoring, which is the common one, which is really the nub of that question. And I'm struggling to answer this one without talking about all the products that we make here at Cooktown, because all of our products are guess what? They're integrations on top of Scom. They're delivered in the form of management packs. They don't add monitoring for the most part. They add sort of platform extensions essentially. So connecting Scom to various tools, alert tuning solutions in the form of EasyTune. So I'm not going to go too vendor pitchy on you, but there are many awesome things that we do that do extend Scom's kind of core platform capabilities outside of monitoring.
Yeah, and jumping on that, I think Christian, that's a good point to sort of talk about extending Scom, in all different directions. What I love about Scom is that at the heart, it's just this really sort of robust architecture, right? Sort of the agent architecture, the management servers, especially since Scom 2012 and beyond, and then a database at the back of that, and it's fully extensible. I've always been fascinated by the idea that when you install Scom, you install it without any management packs. It's just this thing that sort of sits there and doesn't kind of do anything, right? And then can be sort of brought to life in various different ways. But I think with the APIs as well, we've got tools like Squared Up sitting on top of it now, providing sort of dashboards out of it. You can push information into it in various ways as well. I kind of love the fact that it's just a really robust architecture that was very well engineered, slightly sort of over engineered in some cases, right? It's kind of sometimes a little bit hard to get up to speed with, but a really sort of solid architecture that you can see with decades later is still very sort of firmly at the heart of many organizations' kind of monitoring strategies. So I think it's a real testament to the sort of underlying architecture there, and the fact that it can be extended and adapted in many ways. And I guess shout out to sort of what Cooktown are doing there. I think one of the areas where Scom has not been developed further is with the sort of slightly more modern technologies. We all know that PowerShell's not still fundamentally in the Scom console. Is it still VB script? I haven't looked recently, right? But do you still find VB script in the Scom console? Yeah. So it has need to be sort of modernized in those ways.
Yes.
Yeah, VB script, I just have to start because we actually changed a lot of script at the customer from PowerShell back to Visual Basic script.
No.
Yeah. It's for performance reasons.
That's why, yeah.
Running like 5,000 PowerShell script a second on your management group is just not going to work.
Yeah, Nathan,
and Visual Basic doing the same thing is actually quite good. Or you can go the way like Max did, like basically building this in C# into the agent right away as a managed module. But yeah, Visual Basic script, yeah, indeed, it is sometimes there because it's more performant, unfortunately.
I had Sean, if I can pose a question, because I was going to say about the Cookdown Connection Center adding webhooks into Scom, which I think sort of, again, is an area where it really has benefited from being sort of modernized in that way, because everything is driven now off HTTP APIs and webhooks. I'm kind of interested to know whether anyone here has seen or had any success with the web API that Microsoft did add to Scom. So I think the management servers now do have a web API sort of flavor of the SDK. I haven't seen any traction with it. I think Martin Ernst also built a web API, but it's sort of there wasn't a slight innovation there, but I just haven't seen it adopted. Maybe it's too late or didn't get enough visibility.
I haven't gotten around to it, but that would be a good thing with PowerShell. Because PowerShell and then calling REST or web APIs, that's very easy. So.
I tried actually some. Sorry, Bruce.
No, I was just going to say somebody really recently mentioned using it, but I can't for the life of me remember who or what for, and it was unsuccessful.
It was me. It was
me,
you,
Sean?
Yeah, it was me, because I looked into it as part of Squared Up, just like what it could do, how it would work, and it was okay. But again, if I was already writing PowerShell to query the API, why didn't I just continue to use the modules? And the API requests that came back, they weren't always there. There wasn't enough information. Sometimes there were just fields missing. 2022 did add a couple of those fields back in, so yay, but it wasn't, yeah, I couldn't find a use for it. But I'm a little biased, but just as an FYI, but yeah, I just couldn't find a use for it.
Anders says in the chat, we're using it together with IBM NetCall with very high success, which is cool.
Well, that is good to know. Cool.
Kristen, you were going to say something before I talked to you very rudely there.
No. Actually, there was a use case, and we tried to implement it because the customer basically has a system that plans their maintenance windows, and we wanted to basically synchronize it with the planned maintenance mode in Scom. And there was an option but that's not exposed yet as a REST API call, so we have to use back PowerShell again. So it's not complete basically for some things. Although it should be reachable via in the monitoring console, the planned maintenance mode, but it's not possible via the API. So that use case we couldn't cover it with that. We
added a webhookability in the middle of doing this right now in the next release of Connection Center to allow you to put things into maintenance mode by webhook, like now on the back of a customer conversation, but just the now as opposed to the planned maintenance mode.
Cool. You want to continue, or shall I change the topic? Or because one of the follow-up questions I had was, what was some of the coolest extensions that you've seen just in your travels? I mean, the brain power here, we're all over the place. We touch different Scom implementations, different tools. What were some of the neatest extensions you've seen in your travels? Rich, you had that look like, what is he talking about? But
no, yeah, it's a tough question. I'm going to bring up something that came up in a customer conversation the other day, and it's something I've sort of wanted to see. I think it's a neat idea, and it's really nice to hear that the customer had implemented this, which is a management pack that effectively makes the monitoring that Scom performs self-service by the end users, the teams that actually then want to consume that monitoring. And the idea was that those teams can just define the monitoring themselves, I think using sort of a file that sits on a server somewhere. So the server they want monitored, they just dump a file on it. Scom picks up that file, creates the monitors, starts the monitoring, raises the alerts. I think that's a really kind of exciting addition and extension to Scom, because it really changes the engagement model with the teams that actually want to consume the monitoring. We're all very used to this idea of centralized monitoring. You provide the platform, but you end up having to do all the monitoring as well, and even receiving the alerts and having to sort of kind of deal with the problems. And I think Scom has, for a long time, suffered from being not as self-service as ideally it would be for the teams that actually are consuming the data. So I heard about that management pack. I was kind of really intrigued. I'll ask to see if that person can share it with the community or open source. I think it's kind of really interesting solution.
It almost sounds like we're back at WhatsApp Gold or something, where you're going to specify what your C drive the thresholds are by using files and everything. But I'm really curious how that works, because I think one of the advantages of Scom is that you want to centralize things. You want to make sure that monitoring is defined, let's say, at a higher level, and therefore you're not monitoring like individual stuff, but that's one of the key features, in my opinion, of Scom. It's like we're creating discovery and we find everywhere where we have instances of a certain application, and it starts monitoring it.
I agree. I think it's there's been a little bit of talk today around when you start to focus more on the application level, not the infrastructure level. So when you start monitoring applications where the only person who knows, or the only people who know how that application works and what needs to be monitored, are the application team that are that are in charge of it, or are building it, deploying it, owning it, and often it falls to the Scom team to monitor the application, but they don't understand how the application works. They don't know what needs to be monitored. They don't know about changes. So for application monitoring, it pushes that out to the application teams who at the end of the day also need to consume that monitoring, right? So infrastructure monitoring can often be consumed by that central team, but application monitoring tends to always have to go out to the team who can actually do something about it and understand what the monitoring is saying. So I think this was very much focused on the application level and sort of just making that much more self-service.
Yeah, a little side topic here is always fun if you developing management packs is that you're saying, for example, about this application team, they usually don't even know what they are supporting, and it's one of the moments and it's definitely a tip for everyone that develops management pack. It's your time actually to shine and to win bottles of wine or whatever you're going to do, because I always do when I develop a management pack, and the moment's going to happen when you discover for the first time. Always ask us questions. How many instances are we going to find? And they give a number, and you can say, "Are you sure about that?" And then you always ask, "Are you really sure about that?" And then you're gonna put a bet of a bottle of wine on it, because you're gonna always find more instances than they said. So definitely for everyone here that develops management packs and everything, that's your moment actually to win wine.
I like the sound of wine. I'm up for that.
I've just uncorked the bottle, so
yeah, that time of the evening, I understand. We had a prospect who was using the registry on Scom in conjunction with Scom recoveries and Scorch to do some quite cool recoveries when things went wrong. I'm trying to remember the details though. It was along the lines of read from the registry and act based on the contents. It was quite a cool use of like joining together multiple tools. Obviously, Scorch is quite commonly used in that kind of scenario. I just can't remember specifically what they were trying to do, which is a shame, but there we are.
Well, there was a post by Kevin Holman about setting certain criteria in the registry. So when the agent came by and discovered it, it would turn on certain monitoring or turn off certain things. Or adding a server to a certain CMDB group. There was a comment about CMDB in the chat window.
There was.
Yeah. So that was definitely a call.
CMDB, I'm interested to dig into that comment. Thank you for reminding me. Michael, if you're still awake, I fully appreciate if you're not, given the time of day it is there for you. You mentioned CMDB, or at least CMDB Authenticator. Are you referring to using, still there, very nice. Are you referring to using Scom as your CMDB or integrating Scom with your CMDB in some form? And
maybe I can while he answers, because I had a similar use case where these actually CMDB was Atrium from BMC. So, but BMC was very expensive to discover the data. So the Atrium database. So actually all the information was in discovery from Scom. So they actually used Calvarian extender to actually pull the data from the discovered Scom data and push it into Atrium. So it was kind of for license reporting, and all of that was kind of constantly changing. So that was one use case I came across. So it was so specific, so there was obviously nothing out of the box. So that had to be built.
Using Scom for verifying the actual CMDB is the answer. That's interesting. So
yeah, exactly. This is the same. Yeah, because because for that customer, the actual CMDB was Atrium, and they were not sure if it's correct. So they kind of did exactly the same. So
yeah, I used to do something similar at CH Robinson. It was done by hand for CMDB population, and then you check it for a truth check with Scom, and then essentially you'd reconcile and say, hey, someone built a server without telling us, or decommissioned a server without telling us.
So would you use it to actually populate the CMDB with new stuff that was missing? Or just
it could in some. We typically only populate additional properties, but not insert or delete servers, because that required a change record. And so we didn't want to be the ones to make the CMDB change, but we'd notify and say, someone made this server. Oh, so Michael's says that's it, and they'd create alerts about it. So essentially you'd get an alert that says, hey, someone's deployed a server and didn't tell you and didn't follow the process. And then the Scom team's out of it, but the ITSM team or whoever can follow up with change management, get that in there.
Cool, makes sense. I'm thinking Cookdown Discovery, which is a product we make to populate the ServiceNow CMDB with all the data from Scom, but ServiceNow has all the smarts in there to add additional data from Scom versus create new CIs and handle all of that kind of stuff.
I've seen mostly, let's say, customers using the CMDB indeed as just to populate, let's say, extend a class in Scom, populate that, for example, with an assignment group of a specific record, and then use that information, for example, to populate the custom fields in a Scom alert in order that it makes sure that it arrives in their incident tool with the right assignment group. That's what I see quite often.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before. Yeah.
Especially in situations where you have a team where you quite often see that there's, for example, like a Windows operating team, an application team, and potentially even like a SQL team. And who is actually going to handle that specific alert? And then in those kind of situations, that really, really applies.
The eternal fight for ownership.
Yeah. Or what's the opposite of ownership? You deal with that.
Yeah.
Shifting.
Well, everybody's in favor of ownership. The only thing is they're not in favor of owning anything.
Best solution is it just change your organization to use DevOps structure, let's say, and then someone is responsible for that machine and everything on it. But yeah, you still have things left like AD and everything, which doesn't reside on a machine.
And there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, there's always going to be supporting infrastructure.
Windows Defender and all that. We actually, I used Scom a while back when there was a definition update in Windows Defender that actually made Windows Defender act like pretty much a virus, creating some sort of DDoS on the servers. The Defender process would go up to 2 or 3 gigabytes of memory usage. And that was a pretty basic solution. I mean, most of the process, as soon as it goes over 800 megabytes of memory usage, shoot it.
So I'm going to actually jump off of what you just said and go to a scenario that I had where I had a rogue Scom admin create a PowerShell job as a rule that ran across this entire server farm and brought the entire server farm to its knees. So, yeah.
Yeah, career liberty move.
So going forward with that PowerShell discussion from before, we talked about PowerShell sometimes being heavy, when Christian gave the example where he had to switch back to VB script. So what things can PowerShell not do for Scom? Kind of take the opposite approach. we do a lot with PowerShell, but sometimes it's too heavy or too dangerous.
Well, if we get into the Linux area, we'll stop using PowerShell at this point because it's not very well supported yet. Oh, well, it is. You can do PowerShell on Linux, but we'll still prefer Bash or scripting typically. So.
If you have Linux admins and you say PowerShell, you run.
I actually had some relative success with PowerShell and Linux. They didn't like the agent, but once I got the agent on, they were fine with everything else. I even had some of them install the SQL Server ODBC driver on Linux. That was a huge win for me.
See as well in the chat from John Liss, he says the command channels are bad for PowerShell, especially if you're spawning lots of them. Definitely, that's one of those things is that you're going to run into the rate limit on it. That's definitely
there's a limit of 5 concurrent PowerShell jobs, I think.
You can actually increase it up to 25, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, that's definitely an issue. And if you're going to do that, at least I did it, for example, for a maintenance mode kind of thing, is make it as small as possible. And then I had just like another thing that actually picks it up from the management server from there to actually process it. But that's definitely one of the issues indeed, yeah.
I can certainly say internally, if we're coming up with an idea for a new product and we're not sure if it's going to be worth actually doing, in managed modules, then PowerShell is a great way to kind of mock it up and prove the concept. So Nathan will often execute in that fashion. It won't necessarily become production because, as you said earlier, Christian, essentially the performance of it, but it's a great way to get going cheaply. It's a friendly language to use. If I can understand it a little bit, then that's a good start.
Yeah, it's great for rapid prototyping and for logging out and those kind of things. So you just get some stuff rolling there quick. There are things to be the inverse where Sean was asking where doesn't it work, where you'll get some headaches because Scom brings its own version of PowerShell and doesn't necessarily use the one running on the box. So it's not extremely common that you'll hit things, but you could have something where you're like, well, it happens this way when I run it as myself, but it's slightly different when it runs in a management pack. And that's because Scom actually doesn't execute it with the box's PowerShell exe, but it does it with a copy that's included in the Scom build. So that's a downside.
I think the reason for it, of course, that it's using it is because it does the translation on, for example, those MP elements kind of stuff and everything, which, of course, is not done by PowerShell itself.
Yeah,
that's the only. Despite working for Microsoft, that is always one of the reasons I understand that they're using this one, but don't know it from firsthand, to be honest.
They also don't launch a new process, so they can do it in one process and start it as a sub process instead of spinning up another exe. I don't know if there's much gain that way, but
we actually tested this because we created in a .NET run space for PowerShell. So you can do that basically building in your .NET, your run space, and then fiddling around. And we probed it against running it directly versus in our own process. It has all pro and con. So when you control the run space, you can do other things, especially caching the data in the health state agent. So then you don't need to call so many sub processes. But in the end, the agent health state cache is also a bit tricky if you put too much data in it. So
Cool. All right, so there's another question of, well, this would be interesting. What would you love to see in an off-the-shelf management pack that you haven't seen so far? I guess Rich kind of answered that earlier with the self-service. I see Jason popped up. How are we doing on time, Jason?
Yeah, I was going to see if there was going to be a break in the discussion to point at the time, 4:30, or well, it's my time over here. So we're concluding the long Scomathon session, and Richard's going to go and give a lock note. So do you guys want to type any loose threads, or is now a good time?
Let me just tie up your question there quickly, Sean, with another thing that Rich said, which was GCS, basically Google Cloud management pack. the lack of that has come up on like 3 or 4, maybe 5 sessions over the course of today. I'm seeing lots of heads nodding. That to me would feel like if Scom had that, there would be lots of interest in it. You know, there is an AWS MP. I've had good reports from people. I've also heard people say it's sort of getting a bit old. You know, I don't know whether it's still supported, but it does work, which is cool. And obviously Microsoft support Azure sort of kind of good there. So it's just the Google one for a more comprehensive overview of cloud. Wouldn't complete the picture, but it would certainly help.
Keep it in the running then. Okay.
Mm.
Cool. Well then, I think we can wrap it up.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go pop over and start up that last session. See you over there.
Thank you all, gentlemen.
Okay.
Yo.
Thank you.